Welcome back, everybody, to Food as Medicine, where medicine meets the menu. I'm Chef Dennis Arvizu, and today I wanted to bring in a little bit behind the scenes as to conducting research for our future episodes. So I got a question the other day about insights into our eating behaviors, and found it kind of interesting because when we do think about food and eating, many times it's out of a habit. It's out of a more so than I would say a necessity or want. So as I go through some of this research on insights into eating behaviors within the United States, I've uncovered a couple of statistics that I felt were good to share for you and hopefully spark some curiosity and something that we can definitely dig into further. One of the things that we think about is many of us love to snack, and this could be at all hours of the day. Part of it might be that you're hungry, you haven't eaten all day, and you find whatever you can find to scarf it down. Other times you might be bored, binge eating, right? How many times do you find yourself like, I just need to eat something, keep chewing on something? And one thing for sure is you're not alone in that. About 60% of Americans snack up to twice a day, 14% 3 or more times a day. So I guess my question here is snacking a way to satisfy our hunger, or is it just feeling that void I know that we get when we're stressed? Ask yourself, where do you fall in this? So, and then the next question is, when you are having that urge for a snack, what is it that you go to? What is your go-to? Is it something that is unprocessed, like whole fruit, vegetable, greens? Or is it something more processed when you talk about, Lay's potato chips, Ruffles, stuff that has a shelf life that can be for years? And I think the key point here is when you do snack, you want to look for things that are not ultra processed. Before we get into it, let's talk about ultra processed foods for a minute. What are they? Well, to begin with, 70% of our food supply in the US is accounted for by ultra processed foods. And for 60% of adults, this is their diet. Now, while this is still a relatively new side of research that's being conducted, one thing's for sure is that high consumption of ultra-processed foods over a long period of time does have a negative impact on your health. And what I found more surprising is that as of 2024, about 32% of our adult population still have never even heard of the term or do not know exactly what it is and why it's important. So what exactly are ultra-processed foods? I'm sure we hear that term quite a bit. Processed, refined, unprocessed, minimally processed. So the World Health Organization classifies unprocessed or minimally processed are ingredients such as like eggs, nuts, fresh vegetables, whole meats. Now, when we talk about processed foods, we're talking about some of the more basic ingredients, especially for the kitchen, like salt, vegetable oil, butter, as well as canned foods, like canned fruit and vegetables, cheeses, more of natural gourmet cheese. Now I talk about ultra-processed foods. This is where it gets a little bit more, and this tends to be your items like ice cream, your candy bars, soft drinks. And the thing is that with ultra-processed foods, they go through a copious amount of industrial processes that incorporate additives that you normally wouldn't find in your home kitchen. And these are added for one, flavoring, color, but the big one here is shelf life, to make sure your food can last for 5, 10 months, 15 years, but they'll still be there even for your next lifetime. The thing with ultra-processed foods is, generally speaking, they're low in vitamins and low in fiber, but they're very high in fat and sugar, as well as sodium or salt. One of the reasons that I think a lot of us go to ultra-processed foods is taste. It's a taste that we grow up with as kids, and it's just kind of rooted inside of us. Ultra processed or convenience food is generally cost less, and given today's market, everyone is looking for ways to save money. So what are some of these impacts? What does processed food potentially do to your overall health? Many studies today have led to this development that ultra-processed foods provoke type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases. So in a recent study that was conducted about 10 million people, 32% ended up with some chronic diseases such as breast cancer, colorectal cancer, hypertension, Crohn's disease. The most prevalent is obesity. Now, for some, this may sound a little bit extreme, I guess you can say, or is this really true? And it's an ongoing field of research, and of course everybody's different, but I think it's something that to raise awareness for you. And that goes into my next topic here that I uncovered. Was still about 57% of our adult population in the US is unaware of the potential negative outcomes of ultra-processed foods. And what's surprising is very few are reluctant to change that behavior in spite of made aware of some of the potential outcomes. And what are some simple ways to begin to substitute some of these ultra-processed items? Because for many of us, it's like, where do I begin? And I guess the first thing is, the most easiest one goes to snacks. About 60% of Americans snack twice a day, and another 15% go 3 to more times a day. So I think it goes to, are you snacking because you're hungry, or you're snacking to fill a void? And regardless of what it is it if you're bored, if it's anxious, or if you are hungry, what are some snacks that can be beneficial for you? Well, look at like raw nuts, fruit. If you have the time, a smoothie blended with from whole fresh fruit, vegetables. You know, a lot of these items carry a lot of fiber, the healthy fats, and some protein, which allow you to be fuller for a longer period of time and give you steady energy throughout the day versus those immediate highs and lows that you get from when you just consume sugar, which leads into the next topic. About 42% of the American population nowadays are looking for ways to limit sugar. And the big reason is to prevent long-term health issues. And what I've seen over the years is that, especially in ethnic communities, sugar gets consumed at high amounts at a very young age. And year over year, you're starting to see younger and younger individuals have diabetes, suffer from high blood sugar, and need to live with that for the rest of their lives. I, for example, lost a cousin years ago at the age of 7 because of just such high sugar consumption. And that's unfortunate. So we do see that a lot going on these days. And I think one thing is that everything is sweet. And for many, sweet is better. For a person like myself, I've actually not the biggest on sweets, so I can move away from the sugars a little bit more. But I think one thing to look for that I could recommend is, if you are going to buy like a prepackaged item, when you read the label, look for the total added sugars, because any natural food will have sugar. The thing here is that you don't want to have added sugar, which means you're incorporating something that has an additional negative impact, and that could be in form of fructose, so just things that are not great, that your body cannot regulate too well. So sometimes another way to do it is like if you bake on your own. I mean, when you make your own food, you know more about what's going into it. Try keeping it on the lower end of the sugar spectrum, and kind of like what you do with salt, before you eat it, sprinkle a little bit of that sugar essence that you'd like to have. So on that first bite, what you're biting into is already being coated with that sweetness. Now, another one that I found this one to be interesting: healthy aging. 40% of Americans today are finding ways to eat and consume a well-rounded meal to help the aging process. In other words, so you don't age as fast. And a big one for this is adding antioxidant-rich foods. I think that we spoke about the other day, but berries, for example, are huge. They also help with cognitive decline or brain health. You know, the omega-3s, I think we mentioned about like salmon, mackerel, sardines, and all of this is also good for inflammation, which is, I think, what sparked this conversation. So think about some of these things as you're going to build your next menu, your next meal. But lastly, let's just talk about eating out real quick. Eating out, generally speaking, is not going to be the best because we all have different tastes, and as well as, unfortunately, flavor really comes from fat. The more fat that you add into a dish, the more flavorful and it's going to be, and not to mention your wallet. These days, eating even the most processed items come at a hefty price, and it's cheaper just to eat at home, not to mention you know what's going in your food. However, I do know the trade-off is that, one, lack of time. Two, it sometimes is just the convenience, the hassle. I mean, we all have to work or travel or commuting, family, kids, and it gets to be a lot. Not to mention these days, being able to order food or eat out has become more and more accessible and convenient thanks to, you know, your delivery apps, your Grubhub, your, Uber Eats, DoorDash. And even some businesses just offer the convenience of delivery because it's a way to generate additional revenue. So I think for here, what I'd recommend is just try to cook a few times a week at home. And I'd be happy to share some ideas in another episode, and just leave a comment on some of your struggles with this. That'll help me put some ideas together so I can share for you. And I think with this, I'll wrap it up.
You've been listening to Food is Medicine, where medicine meets the menu. We hope today's episode has inspired you to rethink the role of food in your health journey. Remember, the power to nourish your body and mind lies on your plate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who are passionate about living well. Until next time, keep exploring the delicious and healing potential of every meal.